Chapter 14. Hot Woman, a Poet's Dream. Overnight, the cold vanished completely. It got so warm that early risers' feet were aching. Sparrows were chirping nonsense. Even a chicken that wandered out of the kitchen into the hotel courtyard felt a surge of energy and tried to fly. The sky was full of small, puffy clouds. A scent of violets and peasant soup wafted from the trash can. The breeze was languid under the eaves. Cats sprawled on the roof like they were in a theater box, looking down at the courtyard with a condescending squint as the bellhop, Alexander, ran across it with a bundle of dirty laundry. Sorbonne Hotel hallways buzzed with activity. Delegates were arriving from the provinces for the opening of the new streetcar line. A whole bunch of them piled out of the hotel row with the Sorbonne sign. Loud voices echoed. "Sign up for lunch with Comrade Rizhenkova. Who's going on the museum tour? Come over here." Dragging wicker baskets, suitcases, and little bags, the delegates carefully stepped on the rugs and dispersed to their rooms. The sun was blazing. The night's dampness evaporated as quickly as ether spilled on the floor. Corrugated iron storefront shutters clattered upwards. Office workers who had come to work in padded coats were sweltering, throwing them open, feeling the weight of spring. On Cooperative Street, a spring broke on an overloaded Melstray truck, and Viktor Mikhailovich Polsov, arriving on the scene, offered his advice. In a room furnished with businesslike luxury, 2 beds and a nightstand, there were sounds of snorting and neighing. Ippolit Matveyevich was cheerfully washing and clearing his throat. The Grand Combinator was lying in bed, examining the damage to his canary yellow shoes. "By the way," he said, "please settle your debt." Ippolit Matveyevich emerged from his towel and looked at his partner with bulging, unbespectacled eyes. "Why are you staring at me like a soldier staring at a louse? What's surprising you? The debt. Yes, you owe me money. I forgot to tell you yesterday that I paid 70 rubles for the warrants, according to your authorization. I'm including the receipt. Transfer 35 rubles over here. The concessionaires are participating in the expenses on equal footing, I hope." Ippolit Matveyevich put on his glasses, read the receipt, and reluctantly handed over the money. But even this couldn't overshadow his joy. Wealth was in his hands. A 30-ruble speck disappeared in the glow of a diamond mountain. Ippolit Matveyevich, beaming, went out into the hallway and began to stroll. Plans for a new life built on a precious foundation delighted him. And the Holy Father, he thought, gloating. He's still a fool. He won't see those chairs any more than he'll see his own beard. Reaching the end of the hallway, Vorobyaninov turned around. The white, cracked door of room 13 opened, and Father Fyodor came out, wearing a blue peasant shirt, belted with a worn black cord with a fluffy tassel. His kind face was radiant with happiness. He had also come out for a stroll. The rivals met several times and, glancing victoriously at each other, continued on. At the ends of the hallway, they both turned at the same time and approached each other again. Ippolit Matveyevich's chest was bursting with delight. Father Fyodor was overcome by the same feeling. A feeling of pity for the defeated opponent overwhelmed both of them. Finally, on the 5th pass, Ippolit Matveyevich couldn't stand it any longer. "Good morning, Father," he said with inexpressible sweetness. Father Fyodor gathered all the sarcasm that God had given him and replied, "Good morning, Ippolit Matveyevich." The enemies parted. When their paths crossed again, Vorobyaninov dropped. "Did I hurt you during our last encounter?" "No, not at all. It was very pleasant to meet you," replied the triumphant Father Fyodor. They moved apart again. The triumphant face of Father Fyodor began to irritate Ippolit Matveyevich. "I suppose you're not holding services anymore?" he asked at the next meeting. "Where would I hold them? The parishioners have scattered to the cities, looking for treasure." "Note that they are looking for their treasures, their treasures. I don't know whose they are, but they're looking." Ippolit Matveyevich wanted to say something nasty and even opened his mouth for that purpose, but he couldn't think of anything and angrily went to his room. A minute later, the son of a Turkish subject, Ostap Bender in a blue vest, came out and, stepping on his shoelaces, headed for Vostrikov's room. The roses on Father Fyodor's cheeks withered and turned to ash. "Buying old things?" Ostap asked menacingly. "Chairs, guts, shoe polish boxes." "What do you want?" whispered Father Fyodor. "I want to sell you some old pants." The priest froze and backed away. "Why are you silent like a bishop at a reception?" Father Fyodor slowly headed for his room. "We buy old things, we steal new ones," Ostap shouted after him. Vostrikov pulled his head in and stopped at his door. Ostap continued to mock him. "So how about the pants, esteemed servant of the cult? Are you taking them? I also have vest sleeves, a bagel rind, and ears from a dead donkey. The whole lot cheaper that way, and they're not hidden in chairs, you don't have to look right." The door slammed shut behind the servant of the cult. Satisfied, Ostap, his shoelaces slapping against the rug, slowly walked back. When his massive figure was far enough away, Father Fyodor quickly stuck his head out the door and, with long-suppressed indignation, squeaked, "You're the fool." "What?" shouted Ostap, rushing back, but the door was already locked and the bolt clicked shut. Ostap leaned down to the keyhole, cupped his hand to his mouth like a trumpet, and said distinctly, "How much opium for the people?" There was silence behind the door. Papa, you're a vulgar man, Ostap shouted. That moment, a Faber pencil jumped out of the keyhole and wriggled, with which Father Fyodor was trying to sting the enemy. The concessionaire recoiled in time and grabbed the pencil. The enemies, separated by the door, silently began to pull the pencil towards themselves. Youth prevailed, and the pencil, resisting like a splinter, slowly crawled out of the keyhole. With this trophy, Ostap returned to his room. The partners were even more amused. And the enemy flees, 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 sang Ostap. On the edge of the pencil, he carved an offensive word with his penknife, ran out into the hallway, and dropping the pencil into the keyhole, immediately returned. The friends pulled out the green stubs of the warrants and began to study them carefully. Warrant for the tapestry, shepherdess, said Ippolit Matveyevich dreamily. I bought this tapestry from a St. Petersburg antique dealer. To hell with the shepherdess, shouted Ostap, tearing the warrant into strips. A round table, apparently from a set. Give me the table, to hell with the table. 2 warrants remained, one for 10 chairs, issued to the State Furniture Museum in Moscow, Neskutchny Garden, number 11, the other for 1 chair, to Comrade Gritsitsayev in Stargorod at 15 Plekhanov Street. Prepare the money, said Ostap. We may have to go to Moscow. But there's also a chair here. 1 chance against 10, pure mathematics, and that's if Citizen Gritsitsayev hasn't used it to heat his bourgeois stove. Don't joke like that, it's not right. It's okay, Lieber Vader Konrad Karlovich Mikhelsen will find it. It's a sacred cause. We'll wear cambric foot wraps, eat margit cream. It seems to me, Ippolit Matveyevich remarked, that the valuables must be in this chair. Ah, it seems to you. What else seems to you? Nothing. Well, all right, we'll work in a Marxist way. We'll leave the sky to the birds and we'll turn to the chairs. I'm tormented by the desire to see the veteran of the imperialist war, Citizen Gritsitsayev, 75 Plekhanov Street, as soon as possible. Don't lag behind, Konrad Karlovich. We'll make a plan on the way. Passing Father Fyodor's door, the vengeful son of a Turkish subject kicked it. A faint growl of a hunted competitor was heard from the room. What if he follows us? Ippolit Matveyevich was frightened. After today's meeting of ministers on the yacht, no rapprochement is possible. He's afraid of me. Friends returned only in the evening. Ippolit Matveyevich was worried. Ostap was beaming. He was wearing new crimson shoes, to the heels of which were screwed round, grooved rubber pads like a record, checkered socks in green and black, a cream-colored cap, and a semi-silk scarf of Romanian hue. It exists, said Ippolit Matveyevich, recalling the visit to Gritsitsayeva's widow. But how do we get this chair? Buy it. Of course, replied Ostap, not to mention the completely unproductive expense it will cause talk. Why 1 chair? Why this particular chair? What should we do? Ostap lovingly examined the backs of his new shoes. Chic modern, he said. What to do? Don't worry, Chairman, I'll take over the operation. No chair can resist these shoes. You know, Ippolit Matveyevich perked up. When you were talking to Mrs. Gritsitsayeva about the flood, I sat on our chair, and honestly I felt something hard under me. They're there, I swear they're there. Well, I swear I feel it. Don't worry, Citizen Mikhelsen. It needs to be stolen at night. I swear stolen. However, for a leader of the nobility, you have too small a scale. And do you know the technique of this business? Maybe you have a portable toilet bag with a set of lockpicks hidden in your suitcase. Get it out of your head. It's typical dandyism to rob a poor widow. Ippolit Matveyevich came to his senses. I just want it to be sooner, he said pleadingly. Only cats are born soon, Ostap remarked instructively. I'll marry her. Who? Madame Gritsitsayeva. Why? To quietly, without noise, rummage in the chair. But you're tying yourself down for life. What won't you do for the good of the concession? For life. Ippolit Matveyevich threw up his hands in extreme surprise, his clean-shaven face contorted, his blue teeth, uncleaned since his departure from the town of N, were visible. For life, whispered Ippolit Matveyevich, that's a big sacrifice. Life, said Ostap. Sacrifice. What do you know about life and sacrifices? Or do you think that if you were evicted from your mansion, you know life? And if they requisitioned a fake Chinese vase from you, that's a sacrifice. Life, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, is a complicated thing, but ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this complicated thing opens simply like a box. You just have to know how to open it. Whoever can't open it is lost. Have you heard of the Hussar schemer? Ippolit Matveyevich had not heard. Bulanov, you haven't heard, the hero of aristocratic St. Petersburg. You'll hear now. Ostap Bender told Ippolit Matveyevich a story, the amazing beginning of which excited all of high society in St. Petersburg, and the even more amazing end was lost and went completely unnoticed in recent years. The story of the Hussar schemer. Brilliant Hussar, Count Alexei Bulanov, as Bender correctly reported, was indeed the hero of aristocratic St. Petersburg. The name of the magnificent cavalryman and reveler was constantly on the lips of the prim inhabitants of the palaces on the English embankment and in the columns of society news. Very often, a photographic portrait of the handsome Hussar appeared on the pages of illustrated magazines, a jacket embroidered with braid and trimmed with grainy astrakhan, high, slicked-down sideburns, and a short, victorious nose. Count Bulanov had a reputation as a participant in many secret duels that had a fatal outcome, open affairs with the most beautiful, most unapproachable ladies of society, crazy antics against respected members of society, and heartfelt revelries that inevitably ended with the beating of civilians. The Count was handsome, young, rich, happy in love, happy in cards, and happy in inheriting property. His relatives died quickly, and their inheritances increased his already enormous wealth. He was daring and bold. He helped the Abyssinian Negus Menelik in his war with the Italians. He sat under the big Abyssinian stars, wrapped in a white burnous, and looked at a 3-mile map of the area. The light of torches cast swaying shadows on the Count's slicked-down sideburns. At his feet sat his new friend, the Abyssinian boy Vaska No. 41. After defeating the troops of the Italian king, the Count returned to St. Petersburg with the Abyssinian Vaska. St. Petersburg greeted the hero with flowers and champagne. Count Alexei plunged back into the carefree abyss of pleasure. They continued to talk about him with redoubled admiration. Women poisoned themselves because of him. Men envied him. The Abyssinian invariably stood on the running board of the Count's carriage, flying along Millionaya Street, causing amazement among passers-by with his blackness and slender figure. Suddenly it all ended. Count Alexei Bulanov disappeared. Princess Belorusko-Baltiskaya, the Count's last passion, was inconsolable. The mysterious disappearance of the Count caused a lot of noise. The newspapers were full of speculation. Detectives were at their wits' end, but all was in vain. The Count's tracks were not found. When the noise was already subsiding, a letter came from the Averkiev Hermitage, explaining everything. Brilliant Count, the hero of aristocratic St. Petersburg, the Balthazar of the 19th century, had taken the tonsure. Horrifying details were reported. They said that the Count Monk wore chains weighing several poods, that he, accustomed to fine French cuisine, now ate only potato peelings. A whirlwind of assumptions arose. They said that the Count had a vision of his deceased mother. Women cried. Carriages lined up at the entrance of Princess Belorusko-Baltiskaya. The princess and her husband accepted condolences. New rumors were born. They were waiting for the Count back. They said that this was a temporary mental disorder on religious grounds. They claimed that the Count had fled from debts. They reported that an unhappy romance was to blame for everything. But in fact, the Hussar went to the monastery to understand life. He did not return. Little by little, he was forgotten. Princess Baltiskaya met an Italian singer, and the Abyssinian Vaska went home. In the monastery, Count Alexei Bulanov, who took the name Ippolit, exhausted himself with great feats. He really wore chains, but it seemed to him that this was not enough to understand life. Then he invented a special monastic form for himself, a cowl with a vertical visor covering his entire face and a robe that restricted movement. With the blessing of the abbot, he began to wear this form, but even this seemed not enough to him. Overcome by the pride of humility, he retired to a forest dugout and began to live in an oak coffin. The feat of the schemer Ippolit filled the monastery with amazement. He ate only crackers, the supply of which was replenished for him once every 3 months. 20 years passed like this. Ippolit considered his life wise, correct, and the only true one. It became extraordinarily easy for him to live, and his thoughts were crystal clear. He understood life and realized that it was impossible to live otherwise. One day he noticed with surprise that there was nothing in the place where he had been accustomed to finding crackers for 20 years. He did not eat for 4 days. On the 5th day, an old man in bast shoes, unknown to him, came and said that the peasants had burned the landowner, and the Bolsheviks had evicted the monks and set up a state farm in the monastery. Leaving the crackers, the old man left, crying. The schemer did not understand the old man. Bright and quiet, he lay in the coffin and rejoiced in the knowledge of life. The old peasant continued to carry crackers. Several more undisturbed years passed. Only once did the door of the dugout open, and several people, stooping, entered it. They approached the coffin and began to silently examine the old man. These were tall men in boots with spurs and huge breeches and with Mausers in wooden polished boxes. The old man lay in the coffin, stretching out his arms, and looked at the newcomers with a radiant gaze. A long and light gray beard covered half of the coffin. The strangers jingled their spurs, shrugged their shoulders, and left, carefully closing the door behind them. Time passed, life unfolded before the schemer in all its fullness and sweetness. On the night that followed the day when the schemer finally realized that everything in his knowledge was bright, he suddenly woke up. This surprised him. He never woke up at night. Thinking about what had woken him up, he fell asleep again and immediately woke up again, feeling a strong burning sensation in his back. Understanding the cause of this burning, he tried to fall asleep, but could not. Something was bothering him. He did not sleep until morning. The next night someone woke him up again. He tossed and turned until morning, quietly groaning and imperceptibly to himself, scratching his hands. During the day, getting up, he accidentally looked into the coffin. Then he understood everything. Bedbugs of cherry color were quickly running around the corners of his dark bed. The schemer felt disgusted. The same day the old man came with crackers, and then the ascetic, who had been silent for 20 years, spoke. He asked to bring him a little kerosene. Hearing the speech of the great silent one, the peasant was stunned. However, ashamed for some reason and hiding the bottle, he brought kerosene. As soon as the old man left, the hermit, with a trembling hand, smeared all the seams and grooves of the coffin. For the first time in 3 days, Ippolit fell asleep peacefully. Nothing bothered him. He smeared the coffin with kerosene in the following days as well. But after 2 months, he realized that bedbugs could not be eradicated with kerosene. At night, he quickly turned over and prayed loudly, but prayers helped even less than kerosene. Half a year passed in indescribable torment before the hermit turned to the old man again. The second request struck the old man even more. The schemer asked to bring him Aragat's powder from the city against bedbugs. Aragats did not help either. The bedbugs multiplied extraordinarily quickly and bit mercilessly. The mighty health of the schemer, which could not be broken by 25 years of fasting, was noticeably deteriorating. A dark, desperate life began. The coffin began to seem disgusting and uncomfortable to the schemer Ippolit. At night, on the advice of the peasant, he burned bedbugs with a torch. The bedbugs died but did not give up. Last resort was tried, products of the Ilk brothers, a pink liquid with the smell of poisoned peach called klopin, but this did not help either. The situation was getting worse. 2 years after the start of the great struggle, the hermit accidentally noticed that he had completely stopped thinking about the meaning of life because he was busy killing bedbugs around the clock. Then he realized that he was wrong. Life, just like 25 years ago, was dark and mysterious. It was not possible to escape from worldly anxiety. It turned out to be impossible to live with the body on earth and the soul in heaven. And the old man got up and quickly left the dugout. He stood in the middle of a dark green forest. It was early dry autumn. A whole family of white pot-bellied mushrooms had bulged out from under the ground near the dugout. An unknown bird sat on a branch and sang solo. The sound of a passing train was heard. The earth trembled. Life was beautiful. The old man went forward without looking back. Now he works as a coachman at the horse base of the Moscow municipal economy. After telling Ippolit Matveyevich this highly instructive story, Ostap cleaned his crimson shoes with the sleeve of his jacket, played a flourish on his lips, and left. Towards morning, he burst into the room, took off his shoes, put his crimson shoes on the nightstand, and began to stroke the glossy leather, tenderly saying, "My little friends, where have you been?" asked Ippolit Matveyevich sleepily. "At the widow's," Ostap replied dully. "Well," Ippolit Matveyevich leaned on his elbow. "And you're going to marry her?" Ostap's eyes sparkled. "Now I have to get married, like an honest man." Ippolit Matveyevich grunted in confusion. "A hot woman," said Ostap, "a poet's dream, provincial spontaneity. There's no more of that in the center, but on the periphery in the provinces you can still find it." "When's the wedding?" "The day after tomorrow. Tomorrow is impossible. May 1st, everything is closed." "What about our business? You're getting married. Maybe we'll have to go to Moscow." "Well, what are you worried about?" The meeting continues. "And the wife?" "Wife, the diamond widow. Last question. A sudden departure on a call from the center. A short report in the small council of people's commissars. A farewell tear and a chicken for the road. We'll travel in comfort, sleep. Tomorrow we have a free day."